To understand jyotish, it might be nice to just take a quick look at our solar neighborhood and just position ourselves in the context of the total universe. So I have shown here the Sun and our 9 planets, only 8 today since Pluto has been demoted. And although this chart shows the planets in their proper relative size in comparison to each other, in comparison to the Sun, the distances, of course, between the planets and the Sun are much, much larger. One very special planet we call Earth, our home, probably, objectively speaking, the most beautiful planet in our solar system. And as we move outside of our solar system, but remain within the Milky Way galaxy, we discover this incredible galaxy, the Milky Way, almost like an island universe in itself, with about 400 billion suns. Here's a quick picture of the Milky Way galaxy. You can see it's an ocean, almost a cloud of stars. It's not cloudy at all. These are billions of pinpricks, each of these a sun, a star very much like our own sun. And in our own solar system, there are exotic, incredible phenomena like supernovas, shown here, exploding stars. That's the last and dramatic gasp at the end of the life of a star, where a star explodes and the interior of the star, including heavy elements like silicon and iron and gold and so forth, get thrown out into space, peppering interstellar space with dust. And that dust, which gets created by stars, ultimately forms the stuff of which our planets and ourselves are constructed. Because before stars, in the early universe, there was essentially just hydrogen and helium. This next chart shows something quite dramatic, and it shows what happens when you take your telescope and instead of looking through the cloud we call the Milky Way, which is looking through the pancake plane of the galaxy, and you look out into the direction of space, a good telescope will reveal, when you do that, more galaxies than stars. Billions and billions of galaxies, much like our own Milky Way, each with hundreds of billions of suns. So, of course, it is an enormous universe and an enormous display of creativity and intelligence. But here comes the secret about astronomy and astrology that most people, even many astronomers, don't necessarily realize. Let us consider for a moment what's called the Big Bang. The Big Bang is the origin of the universe 13.7 billion years ago, when all of the stars, all the matter of the universe, all of the light, all of the energy, even space itself, was supercompactified into a size as small as the Planck scale. Billions upon billions of times smaller even than a proton. And as this next chart shows, coming out of this unmanifest original state, this primordial state before the universe, which is the unified field of all the late laws of nature reverberating within itself and roiling and boiling and bubbling within itself, come little bubbles, like the bubble shown here, just arising from this ocean, which is called the ocean of space-time foam, the unified field fluctuating, reverberating, frolicking within itself. Sometimes these bubbles disappear instantaneously in a flash of energy, but sometimes, as in the case of our universe, these little bubbles grow. They grow enormously, exponentially. They zoom forth so that in this much time, the universe has expanded hundreds of powers of 10, already to become inconceivably huge in the first billionth of a second of the Big Bang. So it's an incredible thing. But the key point is, if you look at this sphere again, this sphere, which was almost infinitesimally small, which was a seed universe, basically, universe in gestation, everything within that seed, within that initial wholeness, within that primordial spark, was completely integrated and correlated with itself. Everything at the moment of the Big Bang was in perfect coordination, perfect communication, and perfect correlation. And that remains true. So the next slide shows what happens when this bubble starts to inflate, starts to expand exponentially into the universe we see today, spawning galaxies and stars. So we see this enormous initial expansion, you can almost see that from this chart, followed by the subsequent evolution and the formation of stars and galaxies. The important point is, although these distant galaxies today are out of communication with us, much too far away to send a signal even at the speed of light, they all came from the same point. And they are all infinitely correlated with each other, infinitely synchronized with each other. The whole universe, even today, remains in perfect correlation. So that means you can look out into space, you can look out at our planets, you can look out at our galaxies or distant galaxies, and you see something that correlates perfectly with our own Earth and with life on Earth, because the universe is synchronized, it is infinitely correlated. So that means, in principle, since everything in the universe is correlated with everything, you could look essentially at anything and really see the whole story of everything. There is a state of consciousness, a state of enlightenment called ritam barapragya, a state of enlightenment where the seer, where the knower, is so attuned to the mechanics of evolution that they could look at anything, in a sense, any individual, and they can see the current state of evolution of that individual. They can see the whole past of the individual, from which the individual came, from whence they came, and actually even reconstruct the whole future evolution of that individual, of that object, or of that system. State of all-knowingness is called, again, ritam barapragya. And it also explains this infinite correlation of everything. It also explains, since everything is so correlated, you really could, if you knew how, decipher anything from anything. You could, for example, look at tea leaves, and there's a tradition of this, and basically predict anything about the universe today or in the future. So correlated are things in our universe. Of course, that is an unusual skill, and what we have in the science of jyotish, in Maharshi Yagya, is something far more systematic. The great sages that developed the Vedic science of prediction, called jyotish, took their predictions, their predictive power, from the celestial objects, from the planets, essentially, and the sun and the moon, because these planets have such precisely predictable movements and motions that they are unswerving, unvarying, and predictable for thousands and thousands, even millions of years into the future. So what you have in our solar system with the planets and the sun and the moon, you have a perfect clock. You have a very complex and rich clock because you don't have a single minute hand and a single hour hand. You have 9 planets, including what are called Rahu and Ketu, essentially 9 different planets representing 9 hands on a very complex and rich clock, against which you can correlate, essentially, and predict anything. So from planets and the position of the planets at the time of birth, you can really see where that person is in their long course of evolution, from where they came and where they are going. Again, this is a straightforward application of the scientific principle that everything is, in fact, correlated with everything. But jyotish, particularly Maharshi Yagya, as it has been refined and revived today by Maharshi, is an absolutely comprehensive and complete science of prediction, utilizing all of the different permutations and combinations and positions and motions of the planets to even decode the finest nuances of the evolution of even our emotional life, physical life, health, wealth, and fortune.